Hi there, Kelly here with Illume LUTS, and today I'm really excited to share a new tutorial with you guys. It's been a while since we've shared one of these, and this one specifically is going to relate to matching to medium format film. So this was a wedding we shot a couple years ago with our friend Christina Adams, and she provided a group of still film photos that I will be matching to throughout the wedding day. So with all of these, I felt like we were in similar light, we were capturing a similar angle, and so it was a great fit for film matching. So let's go ahead and get started. This first clip here with the bride putting her dress on, I can already tell right away that my white balance was way too warm. So I'm gonna come in and cool this down first. Sometimes I just feel like if you start off with a better white balance, then that just means that once you apply the LUT, it's a little less confusing and you can sometimes get a better color picture. So I'm gonna come in and just make some tweaks there. And then I'm going to come in and grab my LUT. I'm going to grab standard Illume, and then I'm going to go ahead and raise the intensity of this. You'll see that I always apply my LUT within the creative tab as opposed to the basic correction tab because it allows me to lower or raise the intensity that I want to use on that specific clip. So I'm going to raise this all the way up to 200. And then from here, we're just going to be making tweaks until we get it a little closer. So let's start by lowering down the highlights. That's looking a lot better. And then let's balance it out with some shadows. And we'll need to add a good amount of saturation. And let's add a little more exposure. Cool, I can already tell that that is looking so much better. Let's look at the before and after. Way more balanced. I might even add a tad bit more of tint. But other than that, I am really happy with how that looks. Moving on to the next one. Here is a really pretty cake, and we're gonna come in and I'm going to just go ahead and grab Illume. I'll raise the intensity just a little bit. And then I want to come in and raise the exposure. Lower down my highlights quite a bit. And let's boost some of our shadows. Add some saturation. And I think I'll add some tint to that as well. Cool, that's looking so much better. Here's the before and after. Way softer, the greens really cooled down in the background, and I feel like that's a really close match to her film photo. Okay, moving on to this one. I'm gonna go ahead and grab Illume. Gonna raise my intensity up here. Next, I'll come in and I can tell that that needs some exposure. I also need to raise my shadows a good amount. I'm gonna raise the highlights a little bit too. And then I need to add in some saturation. And then I can also tell that there's a lot more green in her film image here. So I'm gonna come in and pull the tint down. And then I'm also going to pull the temperature down a little bit. Okay, I think that looks really great. I did add a little bit more of saturation after I took a second look, but I mean, so much better, way softer. The colors are just beautiful and it really complements Christina's still image too. Okay, here's a beautiful escort card display. For this one, I'm going to come in and grab Illume again. I feel like you find that there's certain weddings that certain LUTs just work best with. Sometimes you just need more of a boost. Sometimes you need to add a lot of warmth if there was a lot of cool tones in the ceremony or in the getting ready room. For this one, it was a pretty balanced day, and so Illume, just the standard one, is working really well. I'm going to raise the intensity up a little bit. And then I'm also going to, I can tell that hers has a little more magenta. And then I want to give it a little bit of exposure. I'm going to lower the highlights down just a little bit. And I'll raise the shadows a tad. I think that looks really close. I might even add a little bit more exposure to mine. And it's a pretty close match. All the tones are looking really similar to each other, and I'm really happy with that. Here's a beautiful portrait of the couple walking away. I'm going to come in for this one, and I'm going to go ahead and grab Illume. From there, I'm going to go ahead and boost that intensity up to 200, and then I'm going to come in and mess with my temperature and tint. I'll want to add a little bit of warmth and bring in a little more greens. Give it a little boost of exposure. And then I'm going to add some contrast to this one as well. That looks about right. And then I'm going to bring my highlights down. Maybe not that much. I can tell that my shadows need to come up a little bit. And then I'll add in some saturation. I think one of the biggest mistakes that I see kind of that light and airy videographer make is not adding enough saturation to their clips. I think by raising the shadows, it really eliminates a lot of that natural saturation that our skin tones have. And so you'll see me raising the shadows of my clips a lot. And then in turn, I balance that out by adding in some saturation. So I really highly recommend not being afraid of saturation, adding some rich and vibrant tones back into your clips, and I just think it makes for much more depth and just some beautiful tones that feel very rich and filled with depth rather than just washed out. I think that's the biggest misconception that filmmakers have when they think of what light and airy. They think of just, very washed out footage, but it really doesn't have to be like that. By bringing in more saturation and also being mindful of your contrast rather than just, blasting your shadows up, I think that that's where you can really add some beautiful tones. Okay, cool. The only thing I can see in here that I would change is I feel like their skin tones are still looking a little too green to me. You can see the skin tones in Christina's image here pull a little more magenta. So I would actually like to come into my Hsl Secondary and select their skin tones and see if I can bring in some more of that beautiful magenta without changing the magenta on the overall clip. So I'm going to come in, grab those, then mess with my highlights and shadows until I can grab more of their skin tones, make sure that's well selected. That is perfect. And now I'm going to come down here and bring some magentas back in. Cool. I think that looks, even if you come in here, you can see the before and after, just looking at the bride's back here, that we pulled in some really pretty natural magentas on her skin tone, and it just complements Christina's images really well. So here's the before and after on that. Here is a really pretty recessional shot. I just love this couple. They are just so sweet. This was such a fun wedding day. So I'm going to come in for this one, and I'm going to grab Illume. Again, I'm going to pull that intensity all the way up to 200. Now you might be thinking, wow, this looks really contrasted. And so I'm going to be raising my shadows. I know that that's something I need to do to get closer. And then I'm also going to bring my contrast down a bit. Let's see, I think 10 will be good. Now I'm going to add in that saturation. And I need to bring some of the greens back in. Cool. And I think that looks really beautiful. So much better. Let's see the before and after on that one. Just really nice and light and vibrant. You know, we did miss some of the highlights here, but I think overall their skin tones are just perfectly exposed. And with those tweaks, it just really lightens and gives that moment just a really more airy and filmic look. Okay, here is a beautiful centerpiece here. I can tell that this wasn't shot at the exact same angle. Maybe Christina was a little bit more off to the right, but let's see how close we can get with this one. So I'm gonna come into here. I'm also gonna grab a lume, boosting this up to 200. Now I'm gonna bring my contrast down in this. I'm gonna bring my exposure up. I'm going to bring my saturation way in. Again, I think that's the #1 mistake that, you know, fine art filmmakers make, is not adding in enough saturation. And I'm going to bring my temperature down just a little bit. Bring my highlights up this time. Let's see, that looks perfect. And then I'm also going to bring my shadows up. Great, I think that looks really pretty. Let's see the before and after. Those florals just look so pretty and vibrant while still remaining soft. Really nice. And then now moving on to the last one here. This was obviously shot in direct sunlight. So let's see what we can do with this and when you're faced into a situation where you needed to capture some details in some direct sun. So for this one, I'm gonna come in and I'm gonna grab Illume Soften. Illume Soften is my favorite for direct sunlight or for, you know, kind of that mixed dappley light when you just need to kind of soften things up a little more than if you were in that perfect lighting scenario, perfectly backlit. So I'm going to come in and do a lume, maybe just give it a little bit more. Then I'm going to come in and raise my shadows up a bunch. Okay, and so this is what I'm talking about. See how desaturated this is? We're missing a lot of life in these colors. You can really see that Christina's image here, there's just punches of green and beautiful blue skies still. And so we needed to bring up those shadows, but now we need to work back in a lot of these colors. So I'm gonna do that by giving a really big boost of saturation, already looking so much better. And then I'm also gonna bring the highlights down. I can also tell that this is really warm. So let's bring my temperature down. Looking closer. Okay, so the only thing that I can see is I can tell that my tables here are pulling a lot more red, where these are pulling in some more greens and cooler tones. So I'm gonna come into Hsl Secondary and I'm gonna go ahead and grab this chair here and see if I can make some adjustments to that color of the wood. Now, as mentioned, I probably wouldn't go into great lengths with my regular color grading routine, but because I'm specifically challenging myself to some film matching, I'm going to go ahead and go for it and bring in, work on this a little bit more. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to cool this down. Cool, that's already looking so much better. And then I might even bring some saturation up, and that's looking a little closer. Not perfect, but I'm really happy with it. Let's see if there's any more basic corrections that I can make here. Might even add a little bit more saturation. Like I said, don't be afraid. And then I'm gonna bring in a little more contrast as well. So let's see the before and after. I mean, I think that that is a really drastic before and after. I hope that this tutorial was helpful for you guys. And something that I do love to do is when I'm working with a film photographer and when I receive the gallery, if I'm still in that color grading process of my workflow, I love to just peek through and make sure that I am color grading in a way that aligns with their beautiful film images. So I highly recommend that you guys do the same. I hope that this gave you some insight into how to utilize Illume better.